and questions of some constituents back in Oregon regarding the O&C plan in this bill. As Representative Schrader said, there is an extraordinary amount of disinformation and obfuscation out there. This is a bottom plan. It provides everyone at the table with something that they don't currently have. For failing counties in Western Oregon, and Representative Schrader did a great job talking about that, as did Representative Walden, it means $1 billion over 10 years to help pay for basic government services like law enforcement, public health, and education. It means putting sheriffs back on our roads, keeping violent criminals behind bars, having better public health, and rebuilding our infrastructure. All of those things are good jobs, necessary jobs, and things that enhance the quality of life for Oregonians and all Americans. For forested communities and local economies, this plan means sustaining or creating thousands of good-paying jobs. I have counties that have chronic unemployment in the double digits. I've taken to telling some people, I represent the new Appalachia. When you go and visit these depressed communities, when the last mill closes in one of my counties, and I talked to the owners of the mill and they said, if your bill had passed, we'd be hiring 100 people instead of firing 100 people in a community where 100 would be the largest employer. This means keeping those mills open, or maybe adding shifts. This plan will keep the raw logs here at home, rather than exporting our timber to places like China. Now, for the environmental community, many of whom have totally disregarded or created propaganda about this bill, it means the first ever legislative protection for mature and old-growth forests in Western Oregon. Let me repeat that. First ever legislative protection. They are not legislatively protected now. In fact, if the Clinton Forest Plan, the Northwest Forest Plan, is ordered fully implemented in pending litigation in a court here in D.C., that old growth will be some of the first to be harvested. Now, since I've come to Congress, I've been attempting to preserve the old growth. This would do it. 1.2 million acres of old growth preserved. Habitat that's fabulous. It's a carbon sink. It has the best areas to recreate. The bill also increases wilderness protection on the O&C lands by 250%, doubling the size of the rogue wilderness, adding Devil's Staircase, and it also will add 130 miles of wild and scenic designation. More river protection on the O&C lands in one plan than in the previous 50 years combined. And we will quadruple the watershed protection compared to Oregon state standards. They keep saying, this is Oregon, this is just the way Oregon private forestry is done. No, we're going to have 4 times the riparian protection. And in terms of herbicides and pesticides, we're going to require the development of an integrated pest management plan through a public process for these lands. This is not Oregon forest practices as we know it and as they are picturing in ads. If they have concerns about Oregon forest practices, they ought to go to their governor and state legislature, because this bill is not that. Now, of the 2.8 million acres, 1.2 million acres of old growth will be preserved. 300,000 acres of additional riparian preserved to protect our water quality for consumption and for fisheries and other values. 1.3 million, less than half, will be managed. Less than half will be managed. Areas that have been previously managed, many of which need thinning, and they need restoration work. And half of those, 1.3 million managed, will be managed on a rotation of over 100 years, providing, again, tremendous environmental benefits. Here's what the plan doesn't do. It doesn't privatize or sell any federal lands. In fact, these lands will remain in federal ownership, and we will pay the federal government $10 million a year to manage these lands, and the federal government will save tens of millions of dollars every year because of the management being done by a board which would be appointed by our governor and would actually govern these forests and manage these forests through an open public process under the Oregon Open Meetings Law. It will not return to the unsustainable levels that occurred during the watch of my predecessor. 1.6 billion board feet the year I ran for Congress on these lands. That was not sustainable. And they would tell people we're going back to that. No, we're not. I ran against that, and we're not going back there. It looks like the best estimates are we would probably get to about 1/3 of the level, 1/3 of that level on these lands, environmentally responsible plan. It does not eliminate national environmental laws. They would still apply. This plan is about trying to restore balance and predictability to Western Oregon. I was pretty surprised at the statement, better known as a SAP, that claimed this proposal would create more legal uncertainty. I don't know how it's possible to create more legal uncertainty on the ONC lands. The BLM is in the current of a multi-year, multi-million-dollar process to rewrite the management plan for these lands. The new plan is intended to replace the old plan, which resulted from a lawsuit. The old plan was litigated and withdrawn. Their new plan was withdrawn by this administration because they said they couldn't defend it in a lawsuit. Now they're developing yet another new plan at the cost of tens of millions of dollars, which will certainly be litigated. And just recently, a decision in federal court has confirmed that the ONC Act means what it says: permanent, sustainable timber production. This decision throws the status quo further into an uncertain area. Now the BLM is required to offer for sale the allowable sale quantity every year. It hasn't been doing that. There's another lawsuit that would make this decision retroactive. That would be over 1 billion board feet of timber. And yet another lawsuit pending seeks to return the ONC logging levels to the 1970s and 80s. This says nothing of pending lawsuits on individual timber sales. That's not certainty, that's chaos. I'm pushing a balanced ONC plan that does three things: provides predictable payments to failing counties, creates jobs, and sustain the existing infrastructure, and legislatively protects the environment and public health. This is the beginning and the first beginning on either side of Capitol Hill of a long legislative process. The first step toward getting a bipartisan bill finally negotiated and sent to the President sometime, hopefully not too distant from now. With that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserve.